Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another market analysis. In the market analysis, I like to go over any interesting information regarding the old school RuneScape economy. Now, this month, there's been a lot of interesting movement in the economy, and I think one of the biggest stories is the release of more detailed information for next. Just over a week ago, Jagex released the actual combat details for next, which put quite a bit of speculation to rest and caused some prices to shoot up and others to plummet downwards. And on top of that, we're always going to be covering anything else interesting in the old school RuneScape economy this month. Hope you guys enjoy. If you do, always appreciate a like on the video. Helps a ton. Thanks a lot, and let's get started. Now, by far one of the biggest updates in January was the next update. Now, when the last time we checked in was just a couple days after the update, so what exactly happened to all of those highly speculated on items, stuff like the armored crossbow, the spectral, things that people thought would be very good at next? We're going to start off by having a look at those. So the armored crossbow has been a bit of a roller coaster this month, going to an all-time high of nearly 80 mil before rapidly crashing back down to close to where it was worth before. So an ACB was going for 75 mil before the next update. On release, it dropped very quickly to around 50 mil, and since then has just continued to crash. Now, if you look at the year review, sure, it is worth a bit more now than it was back in September, for example. But you can really just see how hyped this item was. Looking back at the entire pricing history that we have, look at that, it's massive. We haven't seen any spike like that even close to the next release. Just really goes to show how overvalued that was. Next up here, we have the Spectral Spirit Shield, another very speculated on item. Now, a pretty similar thing has happened leading up to the update. It went up to a peak of, I think, 180 mil some were sold for, but even 115 mil, which is what GE Tracker is tracking, plummeted immediately the day of the next release, and since then has actually remained fairly stable. Unlike the ACB, it has actually retained a fair bit more value, which does make some sense. The only really alternative tanking shield to the Spectral is the Elysian, which costs over 10 times more, where there are quite a few good viable alternatives to the armored crossbow, but we'll get to that in a minute. Next up here we have Dragon Claws. Similar story, crashed rapidly after the next release, although has actually recovered a fair bit. Looking back at the year view, it is still valued quite a bit higher than it was a few months earlier. Now we have the Twisted Buckler here, which has another fairly steep drop off. Not quite as bad as the armored crossbow, but still fairly significant. Now, a pretty interesting one is the Bando's Chestplate. It has dropped quite a bit from its peak around next, which is 27 mil, but if we look back far enough, it's actually significantly higher than this year, and if you look back even further than that, it's actually pretty much as expensive as it has ever been, as far as this goes back at least till 2017. Now, if you compare that to Tassets, which are now worth a similar amount, Tassets have actually crashed back down pretty much to what they were before. Now that really comes down to one thing, Bandosian components. Now the Bandos chestplate dismantles into 3 Bandosian components and Tassets dismantles into 2, which essentially just makes the chestplate a lot more efficient when dismantling into those components, which has boosted up the price significantly, where Tassets not so much. And finally here we have Ruby Dragon Bolts, I think a very good reflection of how popular Nex is. On the next release, Ruby Dragon Bolts peaked at like 5 or 6k each, dropped down a few days after, and now are worth around 2.5k each, still significantly more than a year ago, but obviously their price is dropping. Now what we can tell from all these pricing graphs is that although there is a huge amount of hype and demand for these items on the next release, and while they have even crashed a significant amount, most of them still retain a much higher value than before. So an item like the Spectral is still viewed as being extremely valuable, even though if you look in isolation over this month, it looks terrible that it dropped, 30 or 40%. But if you look back far enough, yes, Nex in fact did actually have a fairly strong impact on the Spectral, and a lot of these other items, honestly. Alright, so one of the biggest price changes this month has actually been on the new unique items from Nex. Now that's not surprising in a way. When new items come out, they are very volatile, but usually when I say it's been a massive price change, that means they crashed a ton, which has actually not been the case for Nex. Now, a really good example is the Torva Full Helm. Now, here's the pricing data that we have so far. So yeah, during the first couple of days, it crashed immensely. That's understandable. It bottomed out at 165 mil on January 9th, and since then has gone up. and it specifically saw a giant increase right around the release of League's Shattered Relics. We can see that in this time frame it has gone from 190 mil up to 275, with a gigantic increase just around the release of last week's update. Now looking at the Torva plate body, a similar, albeit slightly less pronounced, event occurred in the same way, going from around 375 up to around 460 apparently now. Oh my god, what happened this morning? Here we have the Zarite crossbow over the week going from 400 mil up to 475 mil or 480 mil. So quite a noticeable change. And just overall, next items have been trending upwards. So why has that happened? Well, during the Shattered Leagues update, there was actually another small thing added at the bottom. Monster Examine has now been re-enabled for next, and that essentially means that all of the combat information is now known 100%. Before it was crowdsourced and people had their suspicions, but nothing was set in stone until last week. And one thing became very clear, melee is actually quite a bit stronger than a lot of people assumed at first. So the rapier was fairly hyped up before the update. When it dropped, so did the rapier by about 20%, but soon after, due to crowdsourced data, the defense stats for next became somewhat clear and the rapier shot up in value as it actually became one of the best options to use at next. That was later confirmed when the Monster Examiner was re-enabled, and that not only had a very positive effect on the price of the rapier, but also on the best in slot melee gear, which now is Torva. Now I personally believe the Zarite crossbow is trending upwards because of the increase in value of Torva. It's just naturally going up with it because the Zarite crossbow is one of the best in slot items to use at next. Now the wiki actually lists the Zarite crossbow as best in slot. Now whether or not this is 100% gospel is up for debate, but it is on the wiki and that's all that really matters. Not to mention that on top of still being one of the best weapons used at next, there's also been a bit of a demand from the PvP scene, as it seems to be a viable PK weapon as well. All of that I think has been adding to the price increase, which overall has made next more valuable, more money to kill per hour, and thus increasing the value of the crossbow more. And one final factor I think is just how much it is sunk in that these items are rare, and that is also I think adding to their price increase. Now the final thing I want to have a look at is the impact that the new League has had on item prices. Now historically, when a new temporary game mode or League comes out, item prices dip quite a bit because people are selling off their expensive items because they're not going to be using them for Leagues, and they make the assumption that everyone else is going to do the same. Now there could be other factors, but it does seem that when those modes come out, item prices do drop. Now here we have the Twisted Bow, which dropped from around $1 billion down to almost closer to 900 mil, and then shot right back up again. Now you could argue there was other factors here, such as Nex, could be, and that definitely is possible, but there is a few other items that I don't think really were impacted by Nex at all. Here we have the Scythe. The Scythe dropped from like 450 down to around 420. Here's another example, the Harmonized, not useful at Nex at all. It dropped from around 450 down to 400 during the League's release, and has since shot up quite a bit. Here we have a couple more staple items that followed a similar dip, the Dragon Hunter crossbow, dropping about 10%, and the Dragon Hunter lance with a similar dip. Now personally, I'm of the opinion that on January 5th, when Next came out, a lot of items that weren't useful there dropped a ton, but not only because of that update, but also because of the impending League, which was going to be coming a couple weeks after, and everybody knew that. I think their sell-off was actually larger than it normally would have been due to Leagues, but it does seem to have rebounded quite quickly. This year, it really just took a dip for like 2 days, which seems a lot shorter than the first or second League, or really any Deadman mode. Whether that is because people are burning out of the League quicker and coming back to the main game, or because some of that was already priced in due to the next crash, I think those are both viable explanations, but either way, it was a pretty small blip. Anyway guys, that is going to be it for the market analysis. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, let me know down below what you thought. I do read every comment, so I will at least read what you've written. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Now before I go here, I want to give a huge thank you to all of my members over on YouTube. Thank you so much to Cesarium OSRS, The Hybrid, Alejandra, Sejuani's Flail, and Kush Patel for all being subscribed at the Dragon tier. Thank you guys so much, really appreciate it. Also, a giant thank you to Ryan Shady, Mexos, Base Titch, NDM001, and YoYoSub89 for all subscribing at the Runite tier. Really means a lot. As always, if you are looking for another way to support the channel, becoming a YouTube member is a great way to support me directly. You will be immortalized in all of my future videos, get access to a custom role in my Discord server, and my video release schedule. Thanks again, guys, and I will see you next time.